So I think we are ready to start. So thank you for being here today to make this presentation about reinforcement learning and the use of reinforcement learning and the need of reinforcement learning in our problems. And so the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, sorry for not being there with you, but yeah, some personal constraints. So hopefully there are some people at links that I don't see, but I mean, cheers to everyone and cheers to everybody's connected. So spoiler, this is not going to be a presentation on reinforcement learning, rather the opposite. So what I'm going through is kind of very subjective, hopefully not too subjective, algorithm cheat sheet for sequential decision making, basically, where the reinforcement learning is an option, but hopefully not the only one. And this is what I would like to convey. And I will provide some applications to telecom at the end. Hopefully I can make it, but okay. I will cover a large palette of techniques. So clearly, I wouldn't have the time to delve into each of them, but I will provide several references. So if someone wants to dig deeper and have a chat, I'm more than happy. So let's start by setting the stage. So the stage is the one, and how to minimize this? Yeah, okay. The stage is the one of Markov decision process. Markov decision process is basically the model underlying reinforcement learning. But you'll see it will lend itself to several subcases for which several reinforcement learning is probably an overkill. So you will see that this model that you probably know well, this Markov decision model, is can be actually boiled down to several subcases that we'll go through the talk. But in order to set the stage, MDP's Markov decision process is basically an interaction between agent, which controls and optimizes, and the environment that we observe, that we interact with. And the agent basically observes two things. It observes the state of the environment and the reward the environment gives to him or her. And the agent does one thing, takes an action in each state at each time step. Okay, so we're in a state, we take an action, and we observe a reward. The goal is to maximize the sum of rewards over time. And the state, importantly, changes according to some law. And usually, all of this is unknown, usually. But so there are some cases which it is known, and we'll see what to do in this case. But usually, all this is unknown. So the reward function, the reward is observed, but the function according to which the reward is given to us is unknown. And also what is unknown is this stochastic law that basically defines how the states evolve according to our action and according to, let's say, exogenous factors. So this is the model that will accompany us across the talk. And this is, let's say, a pictorial view. So suppose that we are in this state S1. We take an action A from a distribution pi, which is actually our policy. And first disclaimer, this pi, sometimes a distribution, sometimes is actually an action when the distribution is deterministic in some parts of the presentation, but we will see that. But pi is basically what we, is something that tells you how to behave in each state. Then we receive a reward, and then we transition to a next state according to a rule that says what is the probability of having the next state given that we're in the current state and given that we have taken this action. And something that I haven't said is that the main assumption that, let's say, the main constraining assumption is the Markovianity of the system. So if you look at the whole sequence of states in the past, and you're trying to predict this next state, well, you can throw everything away about the past except for the present. So this formulation is probably overly tempting, overly appealing. It is so general that it can describe many real problems. Modulo this Markovian thing that often does not hold, but usually when the state is not Markovian, either you don't care and you act as if it were Markovian, or you put more stuff into the state until it gets Markovian. So this model, this MDP, can be solved by a, let's say, standard, what we call full-blown reinforcement learning. So if it were really satisfied about that, well, the talk would be over, probably. And maybe some of you would be also happier. But what I would like to convey is that there are several subvariants of this model, and each subvariant of this model will lend to different algorithms which are ad hoc, which are not as general as reinforcement learning, but probably are better options because usually converge faster than reinforcement learning. So this is basically my personal view of how at least I tackle sequential decision problems. This is subjective, but hopefully relatable. We'll not go through all of it now, but basically there will be one slide per leaf, let's say. So let's say, at least how I think of it, I ask myself several questions, basic questions, and based on the answer, I will find myself in one of these leaves. And these basic questions are, first of all, do you need planning at all? Do you need to care for the future, or you just want to optimize for the present? Then, how much do you know of the model? How much do you know of the reward function? How much do you know about the probability transition? Then, if you know the model, can you actually solve the problem? Because even if you know the model, sometimes the problem is so hard that you can only hope to approximate it in both cases. Then, do you have data? Do you have historical data? Yes, no. Well, if not, do you actually rely on someone that knows the system so well that basically provides to you a good strategy that you then refine? And last but not least, can you actually predict the model? Probably you don't know it, but probably you can predict it over a short horizon. Let's delve into slightly more details for each of these options. First of all, who needs planning? Not always we do need planning, although we have a Markov decision process formulation.
Recording in progress.
Okay, recording in progress. So it means that we haven't recorded whatever was before. Anyway, it's not a problem. First of all, who needs planning? Imagine that your state evolution is not impacted by the action that you take. Okay, then basically whatever you take now has no impact on the future. So the best thing that you can do is to take the action that maximizes the current instantaneous reward. You don't care for the future, just act optimally now, right? In this case, we land on the classic scenario of news on ad recommendation. Here, basically, the action is the
Sorry,
new
Lorenzo,
news or the ad that you're
problem in
trying
the
to.
room.
Sorry?
We have a problem in the room. Can you wait just 1 minute? We sort
No
it
problem.
out.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Oh, Lorenzo, in the meantime, I did have a question if you don't mind.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
So,
let's fill the gap.
uh, I understand your point regarding maximizing the instantaneous reward, right? But is it the reward for a single agent, or is there also a notion of like a global reward that you must maximize at each time step? Because that is also a dimension, right?
What do you mean by global reward?
I mean, so here we can either do a policy, right? A policy that is for every agent, or a policy that is
Oh,
for the
there's just
entire.
one agent.
Okay. So there is
Just
no
one
notion
agent.
for multiple agents here. I see.
No. Maybe next
And
year.
Lorenzo, we are back online in the room. So
Okay,
you
great.
Perfect.
carry on. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So can I go on?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. So first of all, well, we said that we have this, let's say, subjective view on how to go about with the sequential problems. The first question that we ask ourselves is, do we actually need long-term planning? Well, it depends on mainly on the fact of whether the probability of transition depends on our action or not, right? So if our action actually has an impact on how the state evolves, then definitely we should care for planning, but otherwise, not. And there are basically two main examples for this. The first one is news recommendation or ad recommendation, but I like the news better somehow. So here the action is the news that you are recommended to the next person, and the person is the state. Actually, the state is the feature that describe the person, that usually are collected by cookies that we don't like that much, but it is what it is. So the action has no impact on the state evolution. The action has no impact on the which kind of person we have to recommend in the next step, right? So what you just want to do is to act greedily. Just recommend the most appropriate news to the current person. Okay. So basically, what we want to do is at the current time we are in a current state ST. We just want to maximize this function. Okay. Otherwise, chess. This is clearly a long-term planning problem. So by moving a piece, which is our action, the board state changes. And the action that we take now has clear an impact on whether we're winning or not the game at the end. And by the way, this is what is called a sparse reward problem, where the reward is instantaneously zero. So no one gives you a candy because you move the right piece. The reward is only at the end, whether you win or lose. But it's still a reinforcement learning problem. Okay, so hopefully this distinction is clear. Here you just want to maximize for the present, and here when you're taking an action now, you also have to take to care for the state evolution in the future. And this basic distinction will lead us to very different kind of algorithms. So let's start with let's say with a corner case, but that is still worth to mention, I think. So let's assume that we don't need planning and we know the model. Know the model, in this case, the model is just the reward function. Well, this is just an optimization problem, a classic optimization problem, where the function is known and you want to optimize it. Well, we could discuss for several years about this, about the use case. The several algorithms have been developed in the past, whether the problem is linear, whether it's convex, non-convex, non-linear, whether it's a combinatorial problem, and then in this case, most probably your problem will be NP hard, and you will need approximation algorithms. But in any case, this is, I agree, a corner case, but still it's a subcase of what we have described at the beginning. It's a subcase of MDP. So if you're in this, let's say, lucky quote quote case, then you should definitely use these techniques in non-reinforcement learning. Let's go to something, let's say, less corner, which is supervised learning. So here, the goal is still to greedily optimize your reward function now, but that you don't know the model. You don't know the reward function. So what you have to do is to learn the function while optimizing it. Okay. And if you don't have historical data, you really have to basically collect data live. Sorry, but here you have data. Sorry. So here we have historical data, so we don't have to collect data live, but we have this historical data, and we have to basically exploit that. And this data basically tells you in which state you were, which action you took, and the reward that you collected at different points in time in the past. So basically, a reasonable thing to do would be to approximate, to interpolate this function via classical supervised learning, and then optimize this interpolated function, right? So this is classical reinforcement learning, and I will not even delve too much in details. I'm sure that all of you know this subcase very well. But then imagine that you don't have historical data, and you're still in the subcase where you just want to greedily optimize this function at each time. Well, then you're in what I call online learning paradigm. So basically, what you want to do is to optimize and learn this function at the same time. There are at least three subcases, at least that I can think of. Imagine that this reward, we know a priori that this reward is uncorrelated across states and actions. This is really the unlucky case, where basically you're in a state, you take an action, you observe a reward, and you cannot say anything about different state and action. Well, then what I claim is that what you should do is to play a multi-arm bandit in each state. In each state, you have basically several arms, which are basically the action that you can take. Each arm is associated to a reward, which is unknown. So basically what you have to do is to sample enough time each arm in order to basically estimate the expected value of this reward. And the whole multi-arm bandit literature is on striking a good trade-off between exploitation and exploration. Clearly, if you think if an arm has been sampled enough time and it has always provided good rewards, then you want to stick to that. But if it has been sampled few times, then you may still want to explore it a little bit further, right? So there's this dilemma that multi-arm bandit tackles. Then often the reward is correlated across states. So there is some function that basically links the rewards across different states, right? So you've taken an action in a certain state, and you can roughly assume that across different states, the reward does not change that much. Arguably, the most famous variant is this linear UCB, where you basically approximate this reward as linear in the state, and the state clearly can be multidimensional. So this is basically vector product. And what you have to do is to estimate this theta A1 and theta A2 for each action. But this still assumes that the reward is uncorrelated across actions. If the reward is correlated both across states and across actions, basically we have a smooth function, right? R in both states and action. And then we can go towards, let's say, more fancy stuff. Let's say, for example, contextual Gaussian processes. And I basically put for each of these subcases possibly the most representative work in the literature. Still very subjective. Okay. Let's switch now to the right hand side of the diagram, where basically you do need long-term planning. Okay. This is what you would assume generally when you tackle a sequential decision problem, but as we just seen, it's not always the case. Okay, we may have sequential decision problems where you take actions at consecutive time steps where you basically just have to care about the present. But this is not the case, at least from now on. We do need long-term planning. So it's like being in the chess-like use case, okay? And in this case, let's start, let's say, simple, quote, quote. We are lucky enough to know the model, first of all. Basically, you know the reward function, you know the transition probabilities, and you're also lucky enough to be able to solve the Markov decision process. So basically, you write the equations and you solve it through, say, policy iteration, value iteration, linear programming, whatever you find in this wonderful book that accompanied me throughout my PhD thesis a long time ago. Unfortunately, in practice, this rarely occurs, and this I was disappointed enough to realize it after my PhD, because I thought that what I had learned could be applied everywhere. Not always, clearly, because the curse of dimensionality you easily kicks in. So the curse of dimensionality in the state, when the state grows usually exponentially, you're not anymore able to solve the MDP through classic and exact methods. So what you could do if you know the model but you cannot solve it, well, you can simulate it. Since you know it, you can simulate it and then apply what I call simulation-based search. Let's say AlphaZero is the most well-known example that is rooted into least well-known technique, which is Monte Carlo tree search. And just to briefly touch upon it, Monte Carlo tree search is something that basically allows you to navigate through the tree of options, say chess or Go. This is basically state, and this is the action, basically the piece that you move. You basically grow your tree of options that you have already explored over time. So these are basically the moves that you have already explored, that you have already thought about, say, in the past. And basically what you do is basically four things. First of all, you select the most promising path over this tree that you know. You expand it somehow. Then you simulate until the end of the game according to some strategy that is possibly not too dumb, but also it doesn't have to be the optimal one, not at all, because clearly you don't know the optimal one. So, and you see basically whether this node was good enough to allow you to basically win from that position on, even with a not so good strategy. And then you backtrack what you've learned to all the basically leaves. Well, sorry, to all the nodes up to the root, and basically saying whether you have won or not. And then you iterate. And AlphaZero is basically, well, great improvement upon this, where you basically also add the Q functions, basically, that says, that say basically how well you predict that the game is going to to proceed from that point on if you take a certain action. But okay, I will not delve too much into details, but basically, if you know the model, but you cannot solve it, which is what happens most of the time, and still, if you know the model, known model is a big assumption, but if this is solved, as in the chess or Go use case, then you can simulate it and search across this huge Among Us search space. Then let's turn to something that's, let's say, more recent and nascent, which holds tremendous promise, but still, as usual, as with things that hold tremendous promise, are also very hard, which is called offline reinforcement learning, where you still need long-term planning. The model now is unknown, so you cannot simulate it and you cannot solve it, but you have lots of historical data. Then this is possibly the analogous of supervised learning to reinforcement learning. What is difficult in practice is that in reinforcement learning, you need a lot of counterfactual arguments, meaning you're in this state, you took this action and it went that way. But what if I had taken another action? Well, most probably you won't have all the actions in all states, right? So you cannot basically answer this basic counterfactual question that is very important in reinforcement learning, which is not so much important in supervised learning, because basically in interpolation, the lack of data is less of a problem. But this is not really an interpolation, because changing action in one state can basically dramatically change your long-term reward. But I still wanted to, let's say, raise awareness that these techniques exist, and there Sergey Levine, mainly from Berkeley, who's studying it along with teams. And I think that these are, I mean, wonderful things. Whether it will be applicable, time will tell. Okay, we're almost at the end of the, let's say, diagram. So please bear with me. And then there will be, let's say, an application to telecom to see how we can actually think of a problem in terms of this diagram. So let's assume that we don't need long-term planning, but you don't know the model, so we don't know how the state will play out in the future, and we don't know usually the reward function, but we can rely on someone that knows well enough the problem, that has worked several years on it and knows basically what could work well and what would definitely not work well. So basically, usually this expert will provide you with a policy which tells you what to do in each state, but this policy will usually be dependent on several parameters. And the expert will tell you, okay, when the load is high, you should definitely do this, but it will not tell you how high the load should be in order to take this action. Okay, so this occurs very often, at least in my experience in the telecommunication domain. There are a lot of expert knowledge that have been working on 1G, 2G, up to 5G, and that know well what they're talking about. But clearly, these parameters should be refined and tuned on a side level, on a cell level, on a UE level sometimes. Okay, so the problem is someone gives you this pi theta, this policy that tells you what to do in each state, and you want to optimize theta. You basically have two main options. At least this is still subjective. Okay, but this is what I think. The first option is a la reinforcement learning. So you treat it as a reinforcement learning problem where someone gives you a policy and you want to optimize its parameters via usually policy gradient. Or more recently, proximal policy optimization, which is, let's say, in the same family of policy gradient. And I wanted to stress it because, yeah, it has become fairly popular recently because it's used for LLMs. Although possibly there are better ways to refine an LLM, but this is not the goal of the talk. So the idea is to do some gradient descent or gradient ascent, since we're maximizing the reward on a particular function which tells you which is the long-term reward when you apply the strategy pi theta. And the cool stuff is that there is a particular way to write this gradient that basically gets rid of a lot of terms that you don't like, basically how the state evolves over time. So basically this state transition, and basically only depends on the analytical expression of pi theta that you know. Option 2 is forget about that there is a markov decision process behind, under the hood, and just treat it as a black box problem. So you give you apply pi theta and you obtain a certain long-term reward. And this black box problem, at least something that I'm quite acquainted with, is Bayesian optimization, where basically you start with knowing very little about the function that you're optimizing, that is this sinusoid, and then as you sample this point, and you can think the x-axis as your theta, as you sample your theta, you acquire more information on this function, and by assuming some smoothness of this function, you can basically converge towards the optimum. Then assume that you cannot rely on expert knowledge, but you can predict the model. You can predict, even roughly, even poorly, the model. So basically you're at time t, and you're predicting the state transition over the next t steps, where t can be even small, let's say some tens. You're predicting the reward function over these steps, because the reward function can also, in principle, vary in practical applications. And then a reasonable thing to do is, well, compute the optimal strategy, deterministic in this case, over the next t steps, assuming that your estimations were perfect. And then throw everything away except for the action at the next step that you implement, and then you start all over again. You repredict everything, you recompute, and you implement. So this may seem rather, let's say, reasonable and probably even over naive, but actually it works very well in lots of industrial applications, and it's probably the sub-branch of reinforcement learning. Still a subjective claim, but that I've seen in many successful applications. Not only chemical plants or refineries, power system that you find in papers, but if you even listen to podcasts, there are several applications that pop up. The problem that basically expert point is usually this computational complexity, because at each time, and depending on the time scale of the system can be also quite frequently, you have to recompute a problem which is generally hard, that you can compute at the optimal, but still is hard. But who knows? I mean, with the advent of GPUs, probably this will become more of a thing. But last but not least, and this kind of provocative to keep RL at the end, but hopefully you'll bear with me. I'm not against RL. I'm just saying that it's not the only tool. So when you need long-term planning, the model is unknown, the model is unpredictable. You cannot rely on anyone that is giving you a good enough strategy, or probably you could, but you want to outperform the strategy that most often is not the optimal one. Then you should definitely resort to full-blown reinforcement learning. Of course, what I have not written in the slide, you also have to somehow accept some trade-offs in terms of convergence. Reinforcement learning is probably across all the options that I've listed up to now, the one that explores the most, that makes more errors, right? Because in order to learn such a complicated function, you have to make a lot of errors. So errors means slow convergence, means that possibly at some point you will end up in a bad state, and it will be hard to get out of it if you do reinforcement learning purely online. But of course, there are many. Sorry, there's an echo. Okay, no more. Thanks. But of course, there are several variants of reinforcement learning that are more robust than what I just said. And of course, there's plenty of papers out there that there has been a resurgence, recent resurgence, also thanks to LLMs on reinforcement learning. So I'm not at all saying that it's not an option. It is an option. This is a taxonomy that I like, that probably you've already seen, that can be found on the OpenAI website, that basically is somehow a continuation of my diagram that basically finds all the main variants and main subcases of reinforcement learning, depending on whether you want to learn the model and then optimize, or whether you basically directly optimizes either the policy or your Q function. And of course, as OpenAI also says in this website, this is not at all exhaustive. Okay. And then a small bonus that I wanted to talk about, mainly because usually when people talk about reinforcement learning, don't talk about the adaptive control, although it's been there for longer than reinforcement learning, and possibly I don't know how many decades. So I see, and I'm not only I'm not the only one to see that. You can check out this very nice paper, very recent one, on the interaction between adaptive control and reinforcement learning. So there is a clear analogy between optimal control and reinforcement learning, where the action in this case is unidimensional. You can think of it as the angle at which we steer the wheel of a car. Time is continuous, and when action is applied, there is a certain output, and the output has to be as close as possible to reference. Let's say that you want to steer the wheel such that the car is exactly in the middle of the lane and you're on ice, let's say, in order to make things simpler. Okay. So clearly you have a feedback that is through your eyes, and depending on the current position, current speed, current acceleration, you may want to steer the wheel at the right angle. And if you have ever driven on ice, you know that it's not at all a simple problem. Okay. Well, this very general formulation can be solved through PID control, so proportional integral derivative control, or adaptive control. And let's just say a little bit more on PID control. The PID control is nothing more than something that observes the error, so the gap between your position and your reference signal, and then acts on it in a either proportional way to the error, or in an integral way to the error, or in a derivative way of the error. So basically, this derivative, so the proportion is clear. The integral means that you want you want also to look at the past error and basically take care of it. And this derivative is somehow anticipative. So you want to anticipate what is going to happen by taking the derivative of the error. If the error is going upwards very quickly, then you may want to re-steer quickly. And this is sometimes somehow a sub case of reinforcement learning. Now, if I still have, let's say, 10 minutes available, I would like to basically finally apply all these options to a use case that we find often in telecommunication, which is link adaptation. Actually, scheduling, I think that I will not cover it today. So, okay. Let's change a little bit mindset now, and I hope that most of you have some, let's say, telecom background. If not, it's not a big deal. You can either leave or do some other things. But in link adaptation, what you want to do is, depending on the channel quality, so basically SNR, signal plus interference noise ratio, you want to adapt your way of communicating. And basically, you want to adapt two things: your modulation scheme and the code rate. Modulation scheme tells you how many bits you're using per symbol in order to transmit what you have to transmit. And the code rate tells you basically how many redundant bits you're putting in order to correct for possible mistakes in the reception. So the number of useful bits per symbol, so carrying information, is basically the product of these two things, which clearly increases as NNC increase, but then the probability of a correct detection decreases as this NNC increase, okay? So the throughput that is in somehow a product of these two is something like that, is a somehow unimodal function that has a peak somewhere, given the current SNR. So basically, you want to choose the right MCS index that maximizes. Of course, this is a quite simplistic and naive view, but this, I think, it's important to set the stage with some simple model. So state of the art that dates back probably more than 20 years ago is something that works very well in practice, which is this inner and outer loop link adaptation. ILA for inner, OLA for outer loop. So basically, what you have is basically two things. This ILA, inner loop, that is nothing more than a lookup table. For each SNR, it will tell you what is the right, quote, MCS. And this MCS is the one that is chosen as, not as the one that maximizes the throughput, as I saw yesterday, that I showed the last slide, but as the one that is guaranteeing a block error rate of X%, 10%. Why? Usually 10%. Why? Because block error rate, which is too high, is clearly not good, too many retransmissions, and basically you're not able to get your communication through. If the blocker rate is too small, it means that you're overly conservative, that you could somehow transmit more quickly. So it has been seen that around 10-15% is a good trade-off. So basically, people do lots of simulation and come up with this table. And then, ideally, the user tells you base station what is this SNR, and then the corresponding MCS is used. Problem is that, well, there are a couple of problems. This lookup table has been computed over simulation, not in real life. And second of all, the SNR estimation is poor. So what is done is usually to correct for this estimation with this OLA correction, with this delta. And this delta is basically a correction factor that is computed in an iterative way as the previous delta plus something that is parameterized, which is positive if the correction, if the communication got through, or negative if we have received the nag. So basically, that there has been incorrect decoding. Okay, so this is a very basic feedback loop system that that works again very well in practice. How to, let's say, rethink this problem based on the diagram that we've talked about before? Well, I found possibly four ways to rewrite this through this diagram. The first one is via online learning, where again the goal is to maximize something greedily, where you don't know the model and where you don't have data. So basically, you have to optimize and learn. Okay, so stay with me. The goal in link adaptation can be seen as maintain blur to 10%. Okay, basically, it can be reformulated as given a certain state, which in our case is SNR, so the channel quality, find an action, so the MCS, such that the probability of an error is 10%. Basically, the reward can be written as something like this. So you want to maximize it. So you want the reward to be equal to 0, which is where your probability of block error is exactly X%. Of course, you don't know the shape of the rewards, so you have to learn it. But what is important to see is that your action is not influencing your state evolution. So the SNR, the SNR will not depend on the MCS you have chosen. The SNR depends solely on your position, the channel conditions. So effectively, this is an online learning problem. Otherwise, we've seen that there's a state of the art that works very well, but that depends on a couple of parameters. Okay, this theta 1, theta 2. Well, this is effectively a policy, and this is a reinforcement learning policy. And why? Because if we define the state as the previous correction that you've given to this SNR, the current SNR, and whether the current transmission has been successful or not, then you can see that basically the state, the next state is a function of your action. Because if your action, for example, MCS is very high, and you're basically transmitting too quickly, then possibly your next HRQ will be 0, so the transmission is not successful. So clearly the state depends on the action. So clearly you need some long-term planning here, at least for this formulation. You see that same problem, different formulations, different algorithms, right? And then this policy is effectively a reinforcement learning policy because it depends solely on the current state. So we can optimize this policy, which is a reinforcement learning policy, via policy optimization, PPO, or if you want to use black box optimization, Bayesian optimization. So you see, same problem, but 2 different formulations. Same problem, 3 different formulations. Let's say that you want to define the state as richly as possible. So you don't only want to put the SNR, but also the number of ACNAC, the last MCS, the buffer state of the user, because you think, and you're right if you think so, that the problem is not as simple as I've basically explained to you. Well, if the action is the MCS for the next transmission and the reward is throughput, then this is a classic reinforcement learning problem, where you basically think that you cannot predict the model, you cannot rely on expert. Well, you could rely on expert knowledge, but you don't want to rely on expert knowledge, and you do better. So basically, you can very well use reinforcement learning in the full-blown way. Okay. Fourth and last is via adaptive control. And by the way, all this is are all, let's say, avenues that I have not really explored myself. So I'm basically giving away some possibly good or bad ideas. I don't know, but if you want to explore more, yeah, I'm open for discussions. Something that I was actually thinking yesterday, and not totally true, but is that possibly this link adaptation could be solved by a PID controller. Who knows? Well, because the action is actually a knob, all right? This MCS index is unidimensional. The produced output is the blur, which is actually, well, it's a blur estimated over a finite number of samples, and the reference is this 10%, and you want the blur to be as close as possible to 10%. So looks like that this can fit into this scenario. So final conclusion is that MDP model is overly tempting in general. The MDP model itself can be solved by RL, but hopefully I've conveyed the message that there are several subcases of MDP, and for each subcase there is the ad hoc algorithm that at least is worthwhile to explore. So again, when tackling sequential decision problem, main message is one should try to answer a couple of questions on, first of all, whether long-term planning is needed at all. Second question is whether and how much data is available. Third question is whether we actually have a simulator and whether we actually rely on the simulator and whether we actually have time to simulate. And fourth of all is whether we can rely on some domain expert knowledge. And I would add a fifth one is whether we can actually predict the model reliably over a short time horizon. And yeah, if you want to know a little bit more, I wrote a blog post a couple of months ago on this topic. And I have a blog that I try to, let's say, update every 2-3 weeks, talking about various things that I learned here and there. So if you want to check out, I'll be more than happy. And I think that this concludes my talk. So if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I don't see any message in the chat, but if you have questions, please go ahead in the chat. And in the room, we have some. Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Hello.
thank you for the presentation. Well, I work in cybersecurity and I always work with supervised learning. But you have mentioned that when you apply supervised learning within the dynamic settings, another algorithms could be offline reinforcement learning. I've never worked with it, so could you please tell me if there is some kind of improvement, or what is the benefit of using offline reinforcement learning against supervised learning in these scenarios?
Well, so indeed, as you point out, offline learning is let's say, the analogous of supervised learning when you need long-term planning. So when you think that, at least still subjective, but hopefully not what I'm going to say is quite relatable. So when you think that the action has actually an impact on the state evolution, and you should actually care for this impact, because sometimes the impact is so small that you don't care. Then definitely you should not use supervised learning, but you should go towards something that takes into account the fact that when taking an action time t, you should care for the future. Offline learning, to be honest, as I was saying, is a very, let's say, it's a nascent field. There's no question that supervised learning has been developed much more than offline reinforcement learning. Also, because offline reinforcement learning is per se is very hard problem. So the main problem is that the data set that you give to offline reinforcement learning has to be very rich.
Okay.
And very rich means that for each state you have to have basically explored the large palette of actions and iteratively so
Okay.
across. So basically you have to have explored the tree of decisions quite broadly, which is often not the case. So this is the main problem. So
Okay, thank you. I understand. Okay, thank you very much.
welcome.
Other questions in the room? Seems not, and I can see any, yeah, maybe I heard somebody on the bridge.
Yes, I may have a question.
Please go ahead.
Yes. So thank you very much. It was very interesting and complete. Still, there is one thing I'm faced with now. So I don't know if you have experience with it. So it's long-term lagged planning, meaning that I'm facing a problem in which I'm taking actions. Usually, when you take actions, you modify the state, okay, immediately, and you collect a reward that depends on this action, an instantaneous reward, which depends on the action immediately. While in some cases, you have to plan your system ahead of time. For instance, now I have to decide what will happen in the system half an hour ahead of time in the future. And so and then input continues to come in my system, and so I collect a reward which depends on previous actions, not on this action, because this action take effects half an hour later. You know, so I don't know any. I don't know tools that can deal with it, and I don't know if you have experience with that. I fear that if I use all these methods that you show here, I may not be able to learn anything useful. I mean, the algorithm, the learning algorithm could not be able to learn. Do you have any thought on that?
Yeah. Well, I agree that this is an important case that I have not touched upon, mainly because it's as you say, it's a Pandora's box, and it opens up so many sub cases. And so I agree. Whatever I thought, I talked about assumes that the reward given that you have taken an action isn't instantaneous. And I can already tell you I have some experience on reinforcement learning with lagged reward, and just doesn't work in general. So of course it depends on the lag, but if the lag is several steps, well, it poses a serious problem. Once, at least, of course, I'm not saying that it's a very general technique, but what I did once, remember, was very simply to reduce the frequency at which you take actions, which I agree, sometimes you cannot. But if you can, basically, and let's say that you can only take an action, if the lag is half an hour and you say, okay, I will take action every couple of hours, then you basically average out the reward that you collected during this couple of hours, and basically the first half an hour during which the reward that you've seen does not relate to the action they've taken is averaged out over the couple of hours. So in some sense, by reducing the frequency at which you take actions, you can somehow alleviate this problem. But I agree, it's not always the case. And as far as I know, is one of the problems of this whole, let's say, yeah, palette of techniques. So yeah, I think that you put the fingers on one of the few things that can can hurt. This model.
And okay, yeah, now an idea that could work, talking with you, it could be a stupid idea, but maybe with simulation. I mean, you can simulate already the input of your system from now to the future, and so you will collect a reward that is half the true one, but then after the reward that you compute for the request that you simulated for 5 minutes to the future is like a simulated reward, but maybe can help learning. I don't know. If you pass by links, I would like to talk with you about these things.
Okay. Because indeed, while you were talking, I also thought about something. So this thing could work in your case, because basically when you design a strategy, let's say offline, and you say that this strategy should work well, but there are still a couple of parameters that they want to tune. What you do in order to optimize pi theta in a black box manner. So basically, we are here in black box manner. Basically, what you do is you inject the theta and you wait for some time, and then you collect the long-term reward. And then you iterate. And basically what you do is you build a model that that approximates this mapping, theta to long-term reward. So basically the long-term reward doesn't really care about this lag, because indeed it's averaged out over multiple and many steps. So you don't care about the instantaneous rewards, but you only care about the long-term rewards. So it could work. On the other hand, if you do it a la reinforcement learning, it's still a problem, because this actually implies that the reward that you get is instantaneous. So in your case, let's say after a couple of minutes of thinking, I would so definitely not my best answer, but I would say you could go black box.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep you updated.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to talk more. Thanks, Andrea.
So thank you very much. I think our time is up for today. Thank you, Lorenzo. It was a very good talk as always. So I recommend your posts on your blog. I enjoy them very much. So please go ahead and read them. And thank you again. See you next time.
Thanks to you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.